Matters arising. None. There are no written questions from the public. There are no written questions from councillors. There are no petitions. So on to item 8, the forward plan for noting. Any questions, comments, observations? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Page 12, the local development plan. Obviously, this is a regular question that we raise at every cabinet. It is quite interesting, Chair. When you look at the reports that come from other local plan meetings by other local authorities, we seem to be getting a picture of what's happening across our strategic area. And I note that Epping Forest, East Herts District Council's local plan looked at securing compulsory purchase powers for a Stork crossing. Be grateful for an update on where this council is in terms of its local plan, but also on those discussions about having compulsory purchase powers in order to secure the second link road across the Stork, and whether or not the council is minded to support such a proposal.
So I will make some comments about the second part of that question first, and then comment about the general process. So, as part of the proposals for the Gilston Park development, there are proposals for two changes to the Stork crossing. So one is dualling the existing crossing by the station, and the other is adding an additional crossing. While there might be a bit of a debate about the precise location of the additional crossing, and there's a bit of a difference of view, we're clearly very supportive of that additional crossing. And indeed, we are looking at a joint bid through the Housing Infrastructure Fund to effectively forward fund that second crossing. Because it would be better if that was done at the beginning of the development cycle for Gilston Park, which will enable us then to dual the existing crossing and use it, the additional lanes as part of the sustainable transport corridor, whereas clearly if that second crossing came at the end of the development cycle, we'd have to do something in the interim. So we are supportive of the general principle. We're absolutely co-supporters of securing forward funding of that investment. And yes, there are some land ownership sort of vagaries around where that particular view is around compulsory purchase, and we would support that as well. So that's that. I don't know, Dan, you want to add anything to the...
Well, Chair, obviously the local plan panel meets on a regular basis, a monthly basis, and considers issues and comments on issues to enable us to move forward. Obviously there's still a number of issues to resolve which are external to the council, which the local plan panel has discussed on a number of occasions, the water cycle and the only one that's left internally to discuss is some issues around open spaces. But, you know, we are obviously planning to bring the Regulation 19 document to the 7th of December meeting. Unless there's any specific issue that Councillor Charles wants to ask about.
Obviously,
Go on for hours.
No, that's fine. So are there any other questions on the or observations on the forward plan? No. So we'll forward plan is so noted. Item 9. No decisions taken outside the normal process by the leader or fly holders. Right, so item 10, which is the Town Centre Area Action Plan, which is on pages 22 to 26 of the agenda.
Yes, I'd like to do this report, Chair.
And I'd be happy to second the report, Chair.
Do you want to make any sort of introductory
Yes,
remarks?
the meetings, Allies and Morrison, who are also involved in the production of the local development plan for the whole town, we're engaged to work up an issues and options consultation for the Town Centre Area Action Plan. They're progressing very well with their work. On item 9 on the report, it outlines the items that they've already carried out. We've had a full discussion, presentation from them and a full discussion at the last local plan panel, and there was a workshop held here this week with key stakeholders from the town centre, at which the work was discussed. So they're progressing very well according to timetable, and obviously we're hoping to report back as per the forward plan. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think it's good news, and of course this is of great public interest, the Town Centre Area Action Plan. What I would be particularly interested in is just some questions over the consultation process. Obviously, as I said, there's a great number of public interest in our town centre and this action plan and the thoughts that are going into that. What I'd be interested in is just to get a rough indication of the kind of consultation exercises that will be going out externally to members of the public and different groups within the town, and how that's going to form part of the basis of which this action plan will be developed on. I'd just be interested by that.
Choose an options report which this consultant is producing when they come forward with their issues and options. Obviously that will also advise us on consultation.
Okay, it's not, honestly isn't a loaded question, it's just what the administration thinks would be best suited to this kind of consultation, because everyone here, there's cross-party support for getting going on the town centre action plan. Just wanted to get a flavour from you of what you want to see in terms of the consultation process with the wider public going forward.
Yeah, so just from my point of view, rather than technical detail. So the workshop that was done a couple of days ago, actually, was started the sort of pre-forming of that process. And there was a wide variety of people involved, not just the landowners in the town centre, but civic society, quite a broad variety of groups involved in that. But when we get to the Regulation 18 consultation, I am keen that we learn lessons from the last full consultation, that is done broadly through every available channel. And personally, and I've not discussed the detail of how the specific consultation will happen, I would like to see a sort of, a roadshow that's not just focused in the town centre, but in neighbourhood areas across Harlow, to have an actual active conversation, not just sticking with a few boards, these are what the things are, to take questions and what have you. So I'd like to see a far more proactive and active consultation during that sort of Regulation 18 consultation. And obviously the process moves on from there. When we get to Regulation 19, we're talking about comments on a specific plan for the town centre. But I know that's not a very specific answer, but I am very keen that we have a full and open, genuine consultation and get feedback as part of that process.
Last question from me, Chair. I'm grateful for that, and that gives a good indication to the opposition. I think roadshows do lend themselves well to these types of consultations. When the council has done roadshows to estates, where, for example, with the waste contract before, years ago, they would go around with the roadshow van, show the plans and some of the ideas and things. Those sorts of consultations actually, I think, that lend themselves well in terms of the engagement between the council and the public. And actually, building that conversation will be very important, because everyone, irrespective of political party, wants to be part of that conversation. So I'm grateful for that steer, Chair.
Are there any other questions or comments on this?
The only...
I can't.
Sorry, Chair. The only other point I would make, and you referred to on page 24, the Regulation 18 consultation, again, learning from the past, what I think would lend it. So I appreciate that the consultation is going to go from, it says here indicatively, February to March 2018. But I think if you were to consider sort of road shows and going out to estates, would you be minded to extend that consultation period a little bit more, so that we can capture more views from the public? Because when we've had these consultations in such a short window, sometimes we don't get so many responses that we really do need to get in terms of shaping an action plan that is so important for the town.
So my only sort of comment is getting that balance right between getting on with it and having a genuine open consultation. So I'll take advice about an appropriate window. But I do take the point that we don't want to try and compress it unnaturally to enable the full range of input and consultation. But equally, given that I'm already unhappy about how long this particular bit of the local plan is taking, I'm not minded to make it last any longer. But so it will be a balance. Right, are there no other comments or questions? I mean, this is just for noting about progress, so we can see that is so noted. Right, moving on to item 11, which is the management options for the enterprise zone building on pages 27 to 33. Just before you take, clearly this has been before Cabinet before in terms of the broad options that we asked. That we look specifically at the options for managing the building once it's been built going forward, and this is the outcome of that report. So,
I'm happy to propose the recommendations on page 27 and say a few words in a moment.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. You stole my thunder by basically saying that this had been in front of Cabinet a few months ago and was shared with everybody about our desire to build our own place within the enterprise zone itself. We then went away to do a piece of work about what we should do about the day-to-day management of that. We did an options appraisal to look at a number of options. And actually we feel that it's right, it's proper, we're able and we're capable of managing this in-house, and that therefore that is the recommendation, that the day-to-day management of this new building should be done by Harlow Council rather than extending it to any other partners. In essence, that is the recommendation put into my Cabinet colleagues tonight.
just a brief remark myself. Clearly this is about balancing risk. So it's about, clearly if we gave this to a third party, they would take on the risk of voids and what have you, but clearly they would take a fee for doing so. So it's about balancing that risk and reward. So my view is absolutely to endorse this. It will, I think the risk is manageable. It will clearly enable the council to retain more of the revenue from the rental of the building. And the third thing, which is specifically highlighted in the report, is around, for me, around developing capacity and capability for the future. There is a running theme across a number of things we've been doing of late, HTS being another one, about, as far as is possible in the current climate, getting the council in control over its own destiny financially as far as is possible. And for me, this is another element of that story. Are there any questions? Councillor Charles.
So the Chair, you've outlined one of the questions I had, which was on page 31, where it talks about within the in-house option, the disadvantages, and obviously the council has to manage the risk of actually taking on the liability of empty units. In terms of risk, and I'd be interested, Tony, Andrew, if they could just talk about this. In terms of the risk register that's applied to this and your assessment on it, I just wanted just a bit more detail on how you view the risk in terms of empty voids and what potential pipeline you're planning to actually having a pipeline of potential people interested in actually taking up this opportunity. So don't get me wrong, Tony.
No.
I agree with the principle of this and the in-house option and the opportunity for the council. So yet again, it's not a loaded question.
No.
It's absolutely fine. And I welcome the question, because that's the question that we've been looking at ourselves, and I would be saying as an organisation, perhaps 5 years ago, we would never ever have entertained the opportunity of thinking we could do it ourselves. And I think that shows real credit and real growth and maturity of this organisation, that we feel that we are able and we're ready. And you can look at the Latin Bush Centre. I mean, it wasn't always successful, but through good leadership, good management, it is hugely successful. We also know from soft marketing exercises, we know a building like this is going to be very attractive. We already have 1,000 people working on the Enterprise Centre as it stands at the moment, and it's not even half built over these particular areas. So we know that it's going to be a draw, and we feel very optimistic that we're going to achieve success and we're going to be able to get in the resources long term for the council. You'll also see in the report we've set our margins quite high because actually square foot or square metre we're slightly higher than the market, but we actually think that is also doable and sustainable. But I don't know if Andrew wants to add anything else to that as the project manager.
Sure, thanks. I think, that is the key question, and it's one we've been grasping with over the last couple of months looking at this. I think in looking at this that the target market of companies that we're aiming at is the key thing here. If this was a building that was focused on sort of business startups, it would be a lot riskier for the council because there'd be a big turnover of companies. We're very consciously focusing this building on existing established companies, probably already employing 15, 20 people. These are companies already with a long track record and not going to be coming and going. So I think once we've got occupancy in there, the tenants we're going to have in the building are there for the long term. These are people that are going to be signing 5-year leases, 10-year leases. You know, it's not going to be people there with a constant turnover. So for that reason, I think the risk of voids is low. Clearly, we've got to fill the building first, and until we actually start the construction early next year, we're not really in a position to sign up tenants because nobody will sign up to a building that doesn't exist. But the responses we're getting to the soft market testing in the last couple of months have been excellent, and there's a lot of interest in a product of this nature. It's a building that has not been seen in Harlow before, and the responses we're getting from the property agents is that outside of the West End of London and Docklands and central Cambridge, there probably isn't another example within the London Stansted-Cambridge corridor. So we really do think it's going to attract businesses to the town. For example, last week I was in Cambridge meeting with the director of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and they're now very excited about what we're bringing forward in Harlow because it potentially solves an issue for them in terms of overspill from companies there that are growing. They haven't got the space for them, and Harlow, 30 minutes down the M11 with the new junction in a few years, provides that opportunity. So I think the recommendation has been based on two things. One, confidence in the market, that we're bringing the right product to the market at the right time. And secondly, it's about the nature of tenants in the building, meaning that we're not going to have that constant turnover and therefore the risk of voids.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? In that case, the recommendations on page 27, pages to see, specifically that Harlow Council takes on the management of the building. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 12, which is the potential participation in a Essex pilot for the 100% retention of business rates, which starts on page 34 of your agenda.
So moved, Chair. I think this is something that we should take quite seriously. We've been invited by Essex to join with them, including Southend and Thurrock. It would be a pilot. The government is in chaos at the moment in terms of actually being able to implement the business rates. All their models either favour so much one authority against another that they haven't been able to come up themselves with a viable scheme, and they're scurrying around to find something. Essex, to a certain extent, fits the bill with us because you've got not just Chelmsford and Colchester, but with Thurrock and Southend on board. I don't know Basildon's position because Basildon weren't represented at the meeting where we discussed this. But you've got major urban authorities, so in terms of actually being able to get a good deal in terms of the split in the business rate, that would be very welcome as well. There are risks attached to this. The government's talking about different types of top slicing and giving more responsibility. As far as social care is concerned, they might see this as a way out of actually increasing social care without them actually finding money from the general exchequer. There's also concern about top slicing in the sense that Essex have come up with quite a few infrastructure schemes which might be partly financed by the business rate, but we need Harlow County councillors to start sticking up for Harlow, because most of these schemes are really for Colchester and Chelmsford. There's nothing for Harlow at the moment, so if there is this surplus money, it might not actually come Harlow's way, so that there are risks attached to this as well. Simon's going to a meeting on Friday, and I'd like to say that we should actually give, in principle, our backing to this scheme. I think we should actually show goodwill to other Essex authorities, and in principle we should go along with this. It will not be the last time that the authority will consider this, because if we are successful with the bid, then obviously it will come back to the authority to actually discuss. All we're being asked for at the moment is delegated powers.
So I'm going to say this, I'm going to make some brief remarks myself. So I think the first thing to say is that I'm fully in favour of the principle of retaining business rates locally. But this is one of those things where the phrase "the devil's in the detail" could have been specifically invented for. Nationally, there are a variety of debates and models doing the rounds around how you set the baseline on which you assess future growth that you keep the benefit from, how often you review the baseline, what additional responsibilities in the words of legislation that local authorities will have to take on for retaining the business rates, how equalisation is going to work between the net beneficiaries and the net losers nationally, how you define need and fairness, and a whole variety of other issues, including who takes the risk on business rate appeals and the like. So while I am absolutely in favour of this, in principle, we do need to keep a very careful eye on the detail, specifically in terms of the pilot. So how the split's going to work between the county council and the districts and all those issues will be material, and clearly we need to make sure that Harlow gets its fair share. So just in terms of broad headlines, Harlow Council collects in the order of £40 million per annum in business rates and currently keeps about £4 million a year in business rates. The rest is nationally redistributed. But let's be clear that either in the pilot nor when the national scheme is implemented, whenever that's going to be, currently timetable for 2019, I think that's incredibly unlikely. We're not suddenly going to get another 36 million quid in our coffers. But nonetheless, there is potential upside, and the whole point of this is to incentivise local authorities to enable growth and to invest that money in things that will enable growth. So if, for example, one of the additional responsibilities that councils have to take on in return for keeping more of the business rates was control of the skills funding, I would snap the hands off. If it's not around growth-related expenditure responsibilities, but is demand-led services, as Mike mentioned, for example, social care, I would be less enthusiastic. I think that's true nationally. So what we're asking for here is delegated authority to express, in principle, taking part in the pilot scheme, but we would carefully look at the detail, and when we get a final scheme, what would expect that would come back to a cabinet at least. Sorry, that was a little longer than I intended in terms of my brief remarks. But are there any other questions or comments?
Chair, look, I'm on record consistently saying that, again, like you've said, Chair, in principle, the idea of business rates retention, the principle the government wants to pursue on this, I very much am in favour of. I looked very closely at the paragraphs in the report on the proposal for the Essex-wide pilot, and in particular, page 38. Within my comments I want to make on this, I've just got one question on the process. But clearly, I recognise there are a range of moving parts in all of this, and the different models that are circulating across the country, and we've all followed that process. I mean, in terms of social care, the government's intention was originally to have a consultation this end in the winter this year, but that's more likely to happen January onwards on social care. So there won't be an indication, it seems, until that consultation goes live. So we await that. But I welcome the fact that the council is minded to be involved in this process and look at the further detail as it comes along the line. Obviously, from the opposition's point of view, we would want this council to be getting involved in the negotiations and seeing if they can get the best deal for Harlow. There is the potential in this town for a great large-scale business development, and so there is an attractive proposition for this town in terms of business rate retention. The deal's got to be right, and within the negotiations for the Essex pilot, I'm sure Simon, who you're offering to delegate to go off and do this work, will be fighting for Harlow's best interests, of course. But in terms of this wider scheme, the one question I did have, and you may now know the answer to this, in paragraph 24 it talks about the fact that there will be one lead council to submit this to DCLG. I recognise the deadline is tight, the 27th of October, but have there been discussions now over who would be minded to take the lead on this, and would there be a pool of officers from across the councils supporting that one council? Is that some of the principles that they would use to actually to put something together?
I assume it's Essex, but Simon's
I just wanted to know.
Yeah, and the way the position currently stands, Essex are already starting to work towards preparing a paper that would comply with the requirements to submit the bid. I think the stipulation in the documents that have come out is something like it must be no more than 4 A4 pages long. So it's going to be a fairly brief document in terms of the expression of interest, but Essex are currently coordinating that, but are linking in with all of the districts and the unitary councils as well.
I don't know, Chair, if we have got a county councillor here, whether it could actually cast light on this.
To us read this report tonight, I haven't heard anything from Essex about this.
So, no further questions. I mean, clearly, I take more than a passing interest in this particular subject, I do have regular conversations with colleagues in the Local Government Association, including the chair of the board that's looking at the detail of this. So I will be giving it personally some specific scrutiny when it gets down to the detail. Are there any further questions or comments on this paper? So basically, the recommendation on page 34, and in particular, so A and B, but in particular B, about delegated authority to proceed with the expression of interest in participating in the pilot. Are we to agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 13, starting on page 42 of the agenda, the appointment of a consultant for the redevelopment of Leicester House.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to support the recommendations as indicated in the report and say a few words. Cabinet colleagues, as you are aware, we have too many empty buildings in Harlow. We only have to look at the YMCA building, Acacia House and several others. Leicester House, when it is vacated, becomes council property, and that therefore I think it's incumbent on us to be doing the right thing, whilst we are criticising other partners in Harlow at the moment for not doing the right thing. So we brought this recommendation forward because what we want to do is appoint a consultant who can get all that work done for us, so that when we do have vacant possession, we would have a plan in place, planning authority in place, so that we can actually move very quickly to demolish the current Leicester House site, and then we would have a plan there. What that plan would be, how it would look, what sort of housing may well be in there, whether or not it will just be isolated to the Leicester House current site. This is the work that these people will be doing for this particular area. It's a new way of managing this process, but it does speed it up, and it does mean that hopefully at the end of the day we're not going to have an empty building that we then have to manage the risk of. We can actually get on and do what we need to do, which is desperately build new accommodation for our local community. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Comments? Well, recommendation A, according to the appropriate consultants on page 42, also agreed.
Great.
Right, so we are now on to item 14. There are no communications from working groups, parties, panels, etc. Item 15, the minutes of the Housing Standards Board. But no questions, comments. So noted. There being no items of a matter of urgent business, I conclude the meeting.